My father didn't gain virtues, he gained vendettas. And that's how we start this new episode of How to Avoid a Mr. H, or really how to avoid becoming one. Daddy Recovery isn't just about picking better people, it's about also becoming a better one. How, in observing yourself as a victim of narcissistic abuse, you not only avoid potential partners in every way, financial, mentally, emotional, that can continue this narcissistic abusive cycle on your life, but you also avoid becoming them. The thing about narcissism that my father taught me was he was bad in nature, but he was also bad in nurture. And I don't think we discuss, humanity is such a vast array of experiences and spectrums and theories. And one thing I learned in studying philosophy is that, I love Nietzsche and I love Rousseau. And one of my philosophy teachers told me, because the thing about studying philosophy is you read these philosophers, you dissect them, and you're going to find contradictions. And the first rule about being an actual philosopher, at least back in the day, is to ignore the contradictions, to fight and believe in your perspective as if it can not one single person who will ever read it will ever find a flaw in it. And obviously, you're a human being, and you may be a wise human being, you may be an intelligent human being, but you will be also always a flawed human being. So it's really interesting. That always stuck out to me, especially because of my background where my father trained me to always think I was wrong, to help him either A, cover or support how he was wrong. And it's something that I noticed very much in looking back, how much he disclosed to me of his secrets, of his schemes that were in plain sight, and I was supposed to call them adventures or good moves or the bad moves of a man who was lost, which you obviously heard the episode of Lost, right? Um, but I think in starting Daddy Recovery, I had to recognize that I'm a woman, that I'm Latina, and that I'm a child abuse victim, and that all those things will be judged, and that they will be judged as I won't be a child abuse victim, I'll be a woman who's scorned, or a love child that needs to get over that she was rejected. You know, in the court of public opinion, that's how I will be presented, right? As the kid, yeah, he was a man who made mistakes, not crimes. Yeah, he was a man that failed the child, but that child grew into an adult that failed herself, right? And the reason I say my father never got virtues, he got vendettas, is that he was so obsessed with his image, as most narcissists are, that he never apologized. He never tried to redeem himself. He just tried to shut it down. Anybody who complained, shut it down. If I have to shut down your life, your livelihood, like he would always threaten my mother, particularly if she took him to court, I'll ruin your reputation, I'll ruin your life, I'll ruin your finances, I'll ruin everything. Remember, I may be a criminal, but I studied law. It's that energy of, I will destroy you if you say anything less that I am if you say that I'm not a good man, or if you don't say that my crimes are mistakes, or if you don't say that my sins are just the acts of somebody who's lost. Again, words matter. He was a wordsmith, a word player. And it's why in a lot of my relationships, the dynamics ended up being so endangering or just toxic, because I was taught to believe the word, not the action, because the action disproved the word. And vendettas were virtues. My mother was talking about, he was just on the general principle. It was a general principle. President of GP, general principle. My father would be the first man to talk about morals he didn't have. I have to attack you, just on the general principle that you attacked me. But it's not that. anybody necessarily attacked him. If he lied and you called him a liar, he would see it as an attack and then debase you. And my fear with that is that my father was an actual trauma victim. He became a man that had his own trauma victims, but he started out as a trauma victim. And somewhere along the line, he just lost all concept of what it was to be better, to do better, to genuinely love. Not just make people fall in love with you, but love yourself enough to love them back. To feel so genuinely good that when you make others feel good, you can actually stay present in it and not wonder whether they're going to uncover a bunch of secrets about me, whether they're going to see behind my mask, not feel this pit of emptiness. You could actually be in the moment. And when I dissect Daddy Recovery and the humorous stories of great friendships, poor finances, great lovers, not so great lovers, toxic people, toxic me, I do that because I don't want to be vindictive. I don't want to be vengeful. And I don't want to be that jerk that thinks because I have daddy issues or mommy issues in his case, I'm allowed to be a challenge to people's mental health. I'm allowed to be a challenge to people's emotional health. I'm allowed to say that I'm not a bad person because I swear I've confronted worse. I don't want to be that person that believes my own lies and in turn has inadvertently and subconsciously signed a contract that says I will thus never live in truth. Because it may feel like a funny comparison, but my father, one thing that I found, he kind of lived, how to explain? You ever said you watched something that you didn't actually watch? Everybody starts talking about this movie or they're about this book and then I read that book. Oh my God, I read that book. I love that book. Yes. And you're like, yes, I read it too. I read it too. I read it. It's 250 pages. Yes, there's a sequel. Yes, there is a sequel. Oh. I read the sequel too. Oh, I haven't got into that. Oh, well, you better get to that sequel. And you just start spiraling and like quietly Googling like the author, or the director. My father lived in that energy of like, there's something really funny and oddly exciting about making everyone believe you watched a movie you didn't watch, but also incredibly anxious and worrying about the day they realize, no, I didn't watch Citizen Kane. I don't really know that rose quote. There's a quote about a rose or a rosebud or something. I lied. And he was that energy, but like magnified by 10 because he did cons. He committed frauds. And what is so, bigamy is a fraud, right? Polygamy is a fraud. All these frauds. In many ways, right? What I find interesting, fun, what I'm trying to say is that he lived in that energy. And I understand that energy, even though I at best, I just said I read something that I didn't read, right? But the problem with that energy, when you use that energy in terms of life, she believes I'm not married, but I am. And the day she finds out I am, will she still love me? My grandchildren believe that they are my only grandkids. The day they find out that I have multiple families, and I might even have multiple identities, multiple names. The day they find that out, will they still love me? They'll never find that out. I'll crush anybody that says that thinks that has proof of that. I'll crush them. But what if they find out that I crushed them? It's this dynamic of I'll never be allowed to fully be in my life because I have multiple lives. And the one I choose to most to protect, no matter how I frame it, I'm the one who threatened it. There was this interview with Billy Bob Thornton that he was discussing grief, particularly the grief of losing a brother. And he said, I'm only ever 50% happy. And that's something that I think about a lot, particularly in terms of people who suffer from depression. He was talking about it in the grief of sibling loss. And I've always thought about it in terms of the grief of just depression, of always feeling that at best you can be 70%, 80% happy. But there's always that 20, 30% that's just rock solid misery and feeling like at any moment the good times will end and something will happen. You know, like it's like looking at the ocean and being mesmerized by its beauty and looking at the clock and saying, God, I have to leave by 2. How invested are you in the beauty in front of you when you're already feeling the time? The time it will change. The tide will turn. You'll have to turd. You'll have to go back to your car and go somewhere. You're really here because you have prior anxieties. How blessed do you really allow yourself to feel in these blessings that somehow you had to commit a crime or a fraud or a con or a lie to get? And if those things are discovered, does this lie evaporate? What does it become? What does the truth look like? Then you add on, my lie is that I'm a good person. And in order to be a good person, I have to crush people. I have to ruin their lives. I have to say I don't like it, but I do. And that's why I talk about with my dad, there was never a level of rest with him. He couldn't rest. He could not rest. There would never be rest. Because he knew his crimes, but he also knew how to cover them. And at best, he could just invest and enjoy the cover. But you can't live a genuine life like that, which is why, again, he got vendettas, not virtues. And what scares me about that is the reason he got vendettas is, and not virtues, is virtues are grown by how you see yourself, by how you reflect upon yourself, by how you grow yourself. And he was not a man who grew. He reshaped, but he didn't grow. He didn't become better. He just became better in image. And his emptiness, which I feel really bad about, was feeling. You could feel comfortable in a lie. And you could even forget that everything is a lie. That everybody that says they love you, they just don't know the other identity. And will you have to reveal it to them? Will they become an enemy? What if they start calling you out? Because that was the thing about my dad. Yes, my dad abused me. But he really started hating me when I called it abuse. He never loved me. But that was the switch. When I didn't feed or protect his image. Because the thing is, what made my father a good liar was that he believed his lies. They were all he had. He had to be the first one to fall into his own trap before he set it up for anybody else. And I was saying it's a trap. My detriment, my weakness was believing that he didn't want anything but that. That he wanted something more. That he wanted something more genuine. That he wanted another life. A life where, I think the irony of my dad is, I think I was what he said to himself he wanted. And thus was what he rejected. I'm sure every human being wants somebody that genuinely loves them, that genuinely sees them, that knows all the bad, all the good, and says, I'll hold you. And that was me, which is why I think he pushed me out of his life. I really was that when I look back on that, and I don't resent that. I don't regret that. But if I don't heal that, I will. If I don't grow up and see not only that my toxic relationships are toxic, but that I enter them, I attract them, and I choose them. And that there's no sainthood for somebody who sacrifices themselves. Because that was, it's this weird, I don't know how proud I should be at the fact that I don't hurt people, but I hurt myself. Like, I would rather hurt myself than hurt somebody. My problem is I put myself in situations where that is the truth, that is the result, that is the exchange. It's either he thrives or me. So I'll put myself, he wants the limelight, I'll dim me. Why am I next to that person? That's why I say, daddy recovery is about accepting that, yes, this was an abuser. This was a narcissist. This was a villain. This was your parent did destroy you. You're still here. You still have a chance to be reborn, but you're only reborn in seeing how their destruction affected you, in seeing how you chose that destruction to make it a pattern via other relationships. My father didn't want anyone else to be bigger than him. And I chose people that were the exact same. And my problem is I do have a big personality. I got a big body, a big personality, big eyes, big brain. I'm big. And I think my father, he had a lot of mommy issues. And I have a episode coming up about dating men who have mommy issues and just never really knowing whether that should be considered a red flag, because technically I had daddy issues. And part of why my mother was obsessed with kind of this it's still your dad mentality was that as women, we do get judged. A woman will be more judged for her daddy issues than a man will be for his mommy issues. The problem is, if I had to put my money on who is going to be absolutely more malevolent because of their parental issues, I would put it on the man with mommy issues. Because he's raised in a society that condones, approves, and even encourages violence against women in any way, financial, emotional, mental, physical. And if he doesn't become that person, it's because his nature, thank God, is good, or almost despite of the system. And that's a really tall order. It's a really tall order to ask somebody, to raise somebody in abuse or in anger, in rage, in your own trauma responses, in your own sadness, and tell them, go off and be happy. Make better choices. Be a good person. And in some ways, that was what my father felt his mother asked of him. Well, my father, and it's something that I noted with one of my exes in particular, I think my father had a real lack of compassion for his mother. But, my family had this tendency of saying these horrible horror stories about their own life, especially when they felt threatened or called out by someone else for their bad behavior. You don't know what I've been through. And then they would go off on a secret trauma that nobody knew. And it would hush everybody, obviously, because it's hard. It's a manipulation tactic. I'm not bad because I went through this bad. And, the legend is my grandmother was orphaned at 9, I believe 8 years old. She was sold to this man practically for marriage. He beat her. That man was my father's dad, and that man was my grandfather. She ran away from him for her life, married a lot of men, dated a lot of men, even for money. And my dad was her first husband because he was the first constant, the first male constant she had. And that was a burden on him, and that made him tremendously sad. And that made him, I understand why he had such a love-hate relationship with his mom, because I had a love-hate relationship with him. There comes a point where you realize this person is never going to be my parent. At best, he would call his mom for some brujeria. How you doing? At best, I can call them and we can have a false happy holiday. But it's going to come out. And I talked about it in a prior episode. There was a moment where my father just railed verbally on my grandmother outside of our house. And she talked about how she was ashamed of him. And she just didn't feel like her actions as a mother measured to the man he became. Why did my son become so evil? Was I really that bad of a mom? What did I do to trigger, to nurture this nature? What did I do? Was the nature always going to be there? Was it inevitable that my dad was going to become a thief? Was it inevitable that he was going to abuse women? Was it inevitable that he was going to con? Was it inevitable? Was it some past life energy? I believe in past lives. Was it? And sometimes we get so caught up trying to figure out why a person is the way they are. And we forget that we have an essence that we need to grow. And I think that's where I say he made vendettas, not virtues. He stopped growing and he forgot that he could grow. He focused on growing materially, and whether or not he stole, whether or not he committed fraud, whether or not he lied, he got the money and he grew it. And he dressed nicely for how unnice he was. And something about focusing on building the outside gave him permission to die inside and kill a lot of other people inside too. Because I was telling my friend, I think my father was the first person who taught me there's so many ways to die. There's so many ways to end people. We are too focused on the physical. But sometimes the physical is just the cherry on the sundae. Women cry not simply because men beat them, but they cry before and he almost beats her to stop crying. You ever been hit because you were crying? You ever have somebody hit you because they hit you physically because they hit you spiritually and you cried and they just wanted you to stop? My father hit a lot of people. Again, not physically. But he did hit them when they cried over how he hit them. You cry that I'm a thief, I'm going to bankrupt you. You cry that I'm a woman abuser, I'm going to make you feel like scum. You're not even going to feel like a woman. You're going to feel like scum. No apologies. I was listening back to a conversation my father and I had, and he goes, I asked him, which I don't know why I asked him. I think I was just trying to be fair. I have very diplomatic nature, and one of the things I have to heal is that I really didn't. I love that I was always soft with my dad, even when confronting him. And part of the softness was that I just had hope that he genuinely wanted what he claimed he wanted, which was a relationship, even though it was an abusive one. And I said, do you feel I ever wronged you? And he goes, yeah, your mother, she said she would give custody to you with her friend if she ever died. And I was really upset about that. Mind you, 5 minutes before, he was talking about how he was claiming he was high and on drugs and alcoholic the entire time we knew each other, from my birth to when I finally ended the relationship and obviously poorly resurrected it. And I'm like, this is where it's like, in my next relationship, I'm going to say what I think. I thought to myself, 5 minutes ago, you literally just said you were an addict all my whole life. You never paid child support. You didn't even want to show up for my birthday, let alone give me a Christmas gift, but you wanted custody? What? And that's the thing when you roll with a narcissist. They will literally challenge their own lies within seconds of talking. And that's why it's really hard, not simply to catch them, but to confront them. And that's one of the things I'm trying to heal. I shouldn't be with them. I shouldn't feel like I need to catch them and then have this, PowerPoint session where I tell them this is how you're badly behaving, and think that they want that confrontation or don't want that confrontation, or, like, what was I I know I wanted a dad, but it was clear I was never getting it. And for him to put that on me and not himself. And again, he never apologized for all the harm he caused me. And as a woman, I say that, and somebody will say, well, she's scorned. When you gonna move on? But the problem is, we make moving on superficial. We make moving on getting a new relationship instead of reflecting on how we start them, how we live in them, how we end them. All my relationships ended, including that of my dad, with some level of relief. That's not okay. All my relationships ended with some level of like me putting down a heavy ass backpack and wondering, why was I carrying so many textbooks? I only had one class today. You know what I mean? It was that energy in a very toxic, tragic way. This feeling of, finally I get to put down the backpack. How stupid of me to carry all those textbooks. Judging me for carrying so much and not even asking, why was I carrying? Time to go to the next class / relationship. And I want to feel like I want to grow up enough to know that I can like good people and good people can like me, and I could even dislike good people and they could dislike me, but there doesn't have to be vendettas. I don't have to be a part of someone else's smear campaign because they stole from me, like the producer. I don't have to be a part of someone else's, uh, build myself as an icon campaign because they want somebody to tell them that they're great all the time. And if I make them feel too good, then they leave me. And they start saying, that loser. Like, I just don't want, I'm tired of being and exiting relationships that kind of work like PR campaigns, where I am building the image of partners that are erasing my self-esteem, my essence, that are making me believe that the greatness of me was just made for them, and in being made for them, it's not technically mine, it's theirs. Because that was one of the most horrible things about being a narcissistic abuse survivor, a parental abuse survivor, is that, and somebody said it, I wasn't it's not just that my father hurt me, that he wanted to. It's not just that my father didn't love me, it's that he wanted me not to love me. It's not just that he made excuses via his own being a victim of abuse for why he had to abuse me and abuse others. And it's not just that he is thriving in a system that supports abusers, condones abusers, especially if they have enough money. But it's all started from somewhere. And I don't want to smudge people. Anyone who challenges me to say that I'm not that good of a person, smudge their character, whether it's a bad character, good character, character itself, to defend the image of me, my image of me. I want to be happy. I don't want an image, I want an essence. I want to be so full in myself, within my beauty, my internal beauty, that anybody, because it's not like I won't ever be betrayed again. I hope not. I hope that I actually get smarter from this. It's not like, I won't find a loser and maybe give them a little too much time or energy ever again, but I hope not. But I want to feel I feel like my father trained me, and a lot of his victims were people that were so bright for how dimmed they were. My mother, she didn't teach me in any way that she didn't learn, which was that's still your family. Yeah, they bully you. Yeah, they're mean, but they're just trying to be funny. Yeah, they abandon you. Yeah, they don't show up for you. Yeah, they act like when you show up, it's not a big deal. But they're family. She taught me that way. Because my father abused me, and my mother taught me very poorly how to handle abuse, as if it was an inevitable. And if she thought it was inevitable, it's because she had constant experiences with it. My father was one of her abusers, not the only one. And she was not his only victim. And if I chase images, I'll never really be happy. I'll never really feel blessed. And I will think that attacking people whom I stopped from getting their own blessings, whom I stopped from feeling blessed, attacking them is oddly protecting my fantasy, even though I grieve that it's not real. It's not me further attacking my victims. It's self-defense. They're not victims. What was that? 10 years ago, 20 years ago.